Welcome back to another non-template video, and in this one we're going to look at the switchback, which is a hole that, to be honest, a lot of people will probably use, but there's some subtleties to it that we're going to examine in this video. It's certainly a design that I will use an awful lot, and it will tend to be combined with other features, so you won't ever see necessarily a pure one. But essentially, this concept relies on hitting one shot shape off the tee and then another into the green. We're looking here at 17 at South Yarra, which I think is probably the purest one of these that I've done. And we're then going to go and look into another couple and how you might use this, particularly on, I would say, a par 4, to add strategic interest and really make those angles work for you. So back on the tee here at Yarra, and if we pull up the hole overhead, you can see immediately that the green is angled in such a way that you can see the line in. The ideal line here is from as close to these left-hand side bunkers as possible. So we really want to be hitting a draw, which would mean that we're not starting near that danger, but the ball's going to run out this way. That's kind of how I view shot shaping in this game. You kind of want the ball to be moving, taking the hazards a little bit out of play, so you can start the ball over here and it will work back this way. And then into that green, though, from the middle of the fairway, well, we're going to be hitting a fade, and therefore coming at it a bit more this way, and again minimizing the impact of these bunkers. So essentially what this boils down to is hazards on the inside of the tee shot and then on the inside of the green, and kind of in a bit of a wavy S-bend sort of template, but more of a refined sort of version. Now, how do we make this hole really work? Well, it is really careful angle work. It is constantly looking at this line and working out, does that allow you to access all of the pins? And then from here, well, you're kind of dead. The main reason for that, more than anything, is your green slopes. And if we have a little look at the green slopes we've got on this hole, you can see the green works really hard right to left. So if you're coming at it from this sort of an angle, particularly if you're not shaping the ball back into it, that ball's going to be running away from the hole all day long. Whereas if we're coming at it from over this side, it's still going to encourage you to hit a fade. Now, a real note of caution, this is a very video gamey way of exacerbating those angles. We are far more accurate in this game than we would ever be in real life. This sort of a hole in real life would cause all sorts of issues. But if you have a look at, let's say we play it from over here somewhere, and we've hit to the fat of the fairway, and at Yarra that's generally a bad idea. We're now off a sloping lie pushing us this way. We've only got a wedge in, so we've got a good chance of stopping it. But look at, it's inching us further this way because of the red sloped lie, which means we've got to be taking on these bunkers a little bit more. You've then got to be hitting a fade off kind of a hook lie, which you don't really want to be doing. You don't want to go too far this way because that slope's going to carry you off. This slope can help you, but it's going to push you beyond the pin, and look, it's kind of running away from you a little bit. So if you're not really precise, and that's going to make you want to drop down here, and then that's bringing this bunker a bit more into play, it's just a difficult shot. So we'll have a go and see how we do. We've hit the fade we wanted, and we've got the tempo we wanted. And actually, just short and creeping on, uphill putt. It's not the worst lead we could have had. That's the rough concept. Fade off the tee or draw off the tee, but whichever you choose, it's then kind of the reverse on the approach shot. Now, ultimately, this does really just mean angles, so you'll see a lot of these sorts of holes, but I think the quintessential hole for a switchback really relies on your green complex and how that works with you. We're going to look at a couple of different examples. So just to really make the point about angles, we're going to look at the 12th at Barton Hills, which is an absolute brute of a hole. 500 yards, par 4, coming off a far meaner par 4 that I would never teach anyone to build. This one requires definitely a fade off the tee, because if you look at where we're at, look at the elevation change here, you can see that the fairway kind of runs away from you a little bit, so you definitely want to be hitting that fade. You can't be going straight because you're going to end up in this bunker. Look at where the fairway goes, it's cutting off at this angle. This is as mean a hole as I could possibly try to build. And again, partial driver will be fine here, but look at what you're leaving yourself in towards that green. And if we then look at that green from here, well, you can see, although the fairway's not wide, if you're over here, it's a damn sight more difficult than if you're over here. And either way, you're definitely going to be wanting to play a draw in. Now, this is this course was built around penal golf design. Penal being, if you're not in the right place, you don't have a shot, and if you can't hit the shot, you're in trouble. Whereas strategic design is generally giving yourself options, and you can play out here, but you've got less of a shot than here. This is very much, if you're here, you've got no shot. And if we look at the angle from this side, well, again, the green is sloping hard away from you. To this pin, no chance. Whereas from this side, we had to work really carefully, but you do have a shot of just running it over here and down towards, or leaving it here for an uphill putt. For these pins, one thing, oh yeah, of course it has. One thing that I try to do is make it so that even for all pins with this sort of a hole, you don't really want any pins that are change ups where you want to be playing to the wide side. So, for example, if we're going out towards these two pins, well, the more we're coming from this side, the more we're actually attacking this fall off, and we're ending up down here. And whilst you can use this slope, it's going to be running pretty hard this way. It's not going to stop. Now, having said that, you did have one pin that was a little bit of a funnel pin, but even then, look at the amount of slope you've got here as a backstop compared to here as a backstop. You want to be coming in from this side. Now, the two versions you've seen so far could convince you that it's only a penal hole and it's really difficult. It very much isn't, and there's still a strategic element. The third at Sapelo River actually has, rather than bunkers you have to skirt, you can carry. So you can make it more of a cape-like hazard where you're biting off as much as you can chew. But again, you've got the same thing. The more you can cut off this side, the better that angle gets for you. And actually, if I were remaking this hole and it wasn't such a pain, I'd have shifted this bunker back a little bit, because it would have meant that you could bite off even more, whereas actually you only tend to end up about here. But the concept's still good. Could have shunted the tee forward, but that left too short an approach. If you end up out here, well, you do have a little bit of overhanging tree trouble, but very few people ended up all the way out here, and that was quite interesting anyway. Now, the green, though, is not quite the same. So on previous versions we'd seen, if you were coming at it from this side, you've got the green kind of working away this way. Well, in this case, the green is working back towards us. So that little change means that actually it's a far more receptive hole. You can be out here and you've got a backstop. You can be out here and you can roll it up and over here and on, and you can use this slope to funnel the ball down to this pin. You still have a shot on this hole, and admittedly you have a better shot from over here if you can carry here and you've got a short wedge in. It's a very scoreable hole and you've got complete access to all of the pins, but it's certainly a lot less punitive than the others. That said, same sort of thing. I think the bunkering by the green is the key one to get right. You want that looking really, really good, really hitting that diagonal line, and it can be a really pretty hole. So the next one we're going to look at is the 10th at Darkwater Barrens, and whilst not the hole that people will remember this course for, this one is still really solid. It's a longer par 4, which I think this hole tends to lend itself to a longer approach. Again, if you have a wedge in hand, you can stop the ball pretty quickly. So kind of 460, 470, I think this falls into a really good range. Now, what this one did was added a couple of little twists to it. You'll see, first of all, we've got a little bit of reverse camber. So the further away you are, it's just going to exaggerate anything that isn't really hugging these bunkers. And actually, if memory serves, I built a little bit of a spine here so that anything this way was going to trickle further left, anything this way was going to go further right, and then further left, which really exacerbated that. Do you want to carry these bunkers or not? Because if you do, well, you're ending up down here and you've got a really easy shot into the green. Whereas if you end up over here, that bunkering is coming far more into play. And essentially, this little mound was just redirecting balls because of that. So maybe a touch of a hog's back element. The second part we've got that slightly adds a little kink to this one is this little spine at the front of the green. Now, again, with the prototypical switchback, you'd probably want this going this way. And there's not much of that. There's a little bit of it on these back pins and a little bit of it here, but you've got a mini bowl just about here. And this spine in the front, what that did, I felt, was meant that for this pin, you desperately wanted to be coming from this side. Whereas if you're coming from this side, going to the this sort of a pin, well, that can often leave you a lot of green to work with and actually end up being potentially an easier shot from here. Well, from here, that made it a little bit more tricky, but it did also provide a little bit of a backstop and a way to funnel the ball close to this pin, which might look a little bit more protected. So again, giving you a small option of how you might want to play your approach. The back tier really was just kind of encouraging you to feel like you were challenging the water long a little bit more. A high back tier, well, means it's going to be more carry, which means you can't run the ball up as much, which means you have to push it longer, which means that water is a touch more in play. At least it would be in real life. In the game, less so. So that's our switchback, and here we finish looking at the 18th hole at Ouarzazate, which, same concept, just with a little centerline bunker added. Still want to challenge this trouble on the right hand side, and you'll see the green is really angled to encourage that approach from this side of the fairway. From here you're carrying far more of that big waste bunker. And that's all it is. It's really just a way to emphasize angles and make them really work for you, but thinking again about how the green can make this work. Now in this case, I thought this one was interesting because if you're coming from this side and it's quite a long hole and you go long, well, suddenly you're facing that really nasty putt back downhill. So you can still play with how you want the green to do, but you've got to be really mindful of it. I think it matters a lot more than some other holes. That's really all there is. It's one shot shape off the tee, another shot shape towards the green, and then a green complex that really fits what you want to try to do. And there's multiple ways in which you can do that. It's a great par 4 design and something that I will use quite a lot. Hopefully this has helped, and see you again soon.